us on this Friday morning. So let's get going because we have a lot of ground to cover. Education Minister Dr. NAPSPA Dolly confirming yesterday afternoon what most believed was inevitable because of the COVID-19 surge that we're experiencing right now is an amended date for the SEA, the Secondary Entrance Assessment Exam. It was scheduled for June the 10th, but now it's going to be pushed back 3 weeks later to Thursday, the 1st of July. Stakeholders, including TUTA, the Trinidad Unified Teachers Association, NAPSPA, the National Primary Schools Principals Association, voiced their views on the date in the past. And following yesterday's announcement, NAPSPA says it hopes that the new date gives the ministry sufficient time to deal with a number of concerns, including the vaccination of staff and the principals involved in administering the exam. But as I said, you can only imagine what the students themselves are going through. And that's another thing. Remember, we're talking about students just 11 and 12 years old. Put yourself in that situation. We all were there at one time with the anxiety about common entrance and SEA. Now you're in a situation where, with your parents and so on, you almost can't wait for this thing to be over. So it's high anxiety, and we've talked about this over and over again, those challenges. But let's get a perspective now from the new president of NAPSPA, Carly Dean. She succeeded Lance Motley with the election on February the 24th of this year. Ms. Dean, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me, Mr. Mohammed.
You're more than welcome. So we have the statement here issued by yourself on behalf of NAPSPA as president, quite appropriately. And just so we understand it, you fully support this decision?
Yes, we support the decision of the change because of the drastic numbers of COVID-19 positive cases. However, we also want to hold strong to the fact that our union, as well as I, and the executive of NAPSPA, we would have met. And we are also saying that the Ministry of Health officials need to give that clearance. So until that happens, we will stick with the date of the 1st of July. However, if it cannot be possible on the 1st of July, we look for a suitable date that the Ministry of Health gives that okay.
And as far as the Ministry of Health's clearance, just so I can understand you again, and we'll go through the points that were raised in the media release as we move along, because the issue of consultation has come up yet again when we talk about the discussions with the Ministry of Education. But what will you be expecting to hear? Some actual formal statement of the all clear from the Ministry of Health before July the 1st? Is that what you want to hear?
What we would want to hear is the Ministry of Health working with the Ministry of Education and stating that because of the decrease in the number of cases, we have no problem with the SCA examination taking place. That's what we would look at.
So let's talk about the concerns, though, of your members, because your members are on the front line. Your principals have to go and collect documents, collect paperwork, and so on to facilitate the SCA if it is to be held on July the 1st. Let's hear about those concerns.
Okay, so one of our major concerns is this year, for 2021 examination, there has been a change in the role of the center manager. Usually, principals are the center managers for the SEA examination, and we are based at school. And the exam supervisor usually goes, collects the scripts, and come to the school with it, and they leave as well with it. This year, we saw a change. They have stated that the center managers need to go and collect it at the sites. And this we are not in agreement with at all, because normally at the school, the principal or the center manager has a very important role. We have to ensure all is in place. So therefore, we definitely would like this to be changed.
And as far as that process, because I note that in highlighting that issue as the second point of the 4 points raised in the statement from NAPSPA yesterday, you started with the issue of consultation. And again, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but it seems that every time we talk about these issues with various stakeholders in the education sector, not just in this term, but previous term and the one before that and so on, there almost always seems to be an issue, Ms. Hayes, with consultation.
Yes, definitely, because we would have attended consultation with the ministry in April, and certain suggestions were made. However, to our shock, the announcement was made that the date would have stayed the same. That was the initial statement. And now, you heard yesterday the minister referring to that consultation session and stating now that we had suggested at that time the 1st of July. We also also made other suggestions. We made suggestions of physical attendance of the students on the school compound to give them that level of support. However, of course, as you can see, because of the cases, we definitely don't agree with that anymore. This is a fluid situation because it's a pandemic. So we have to go, like I said, based on the situation, based on what is at hand, and how many cases we have positive at the time. Because if you notice that the minister also quoted positive cases and how much it needs to be at, approximately less than 100, so that we can at least have the examination children coming out. Many persons are scared. So we need, we are clamoring as well for the ministry, and I heard her say it at yesterday's press conference, for principals and teachers to be given access if they are willing to take the vaccine.
And we'll get to the point that you finished off this statement with about overdue changes to our education system, which is kind of like not just the elephant in the room, but the blue whale in the room, which is something that we've been hearing about for a long time. But on the issue of all of the COVID-19 protocols being in place for all of the venues where the SEA is to be administered, are you satisfied that that is going to be achieved to allow for the examination if all goes well and the numbers of infections go down well ahead of July the 1st?
Well, we are still clamoring with the Ministry of Education and asking for them to deal with the certain things that have been reported by principals on the SIMS platform. Because sinks, some schools still don't have sinks at the entry points. And in the ending of March 2021, we received a survey from the Ministry of Education asking about sinks installations, and if you didn't have sinks, when would it be installed? If you didn't have thermal scanners, when will it be installed? And therefore, we were quite upset over that because you are asking principals who have limited funds to try to find stakeholders to purchase these items. So what we have seen since we made that statement at the ending of March, that some sinks have started to be installed in schools. In fact, some sinks are being installed in schools without the principal's knowledge, and they are installing it at the wrong location. Because we need sinks installed at the entry points of all schools. Some schools were able to get it, Mr. Mohammed, but some schools didn't get it. So therefore now the ministry, are seeing the ministry trying to ensure that these things happen. There are also critical works still to be done. Like I said, all these things are reported on the SIMS platform by our members. However, we see a level of tardiness in dealing with the matters.
And there are so many issues when we talk about the education sector, and especially when we liaise with people like yourself representing the principals who are so vital to this entire process. But again, before we talk about our entire system, I'm sure you're sparing a thought for the students themselves, because I mean, we are 6 weeks away from July the 1st. We were 3 weeks away from June the 10th, and the anxiety within the building. Now it's been adjusted again. Do you have any sympathy for parents who might say, look, this thing is too much. I mean, my child has been you're getting ready, you're not sure, the anxiety, the anxiety levels, we're already coping with COVID-19, we have economic challenges, some people out of jobs and so on. How do you put all of that in context, given the organization that you represent, when we're talking about 11 and 12-year-olds coping with a situation like this?
Well, definitely the parents are one of our major stakeholders in schools, and we empathize with parents. We understand. Our teachers as well, they are crying out as well. We understand the situation. We would like the exam to take place, but we have always maintained this advice to parents. We cannot sacrifice the health and safety of our teachers and students for an examination. We cannot. We just cannot. And we are there counseling the student support services, will assist in counseling the students, counseling the teachers, because this is a situation that mental health is an issue. And we understand that, and we are trying our best to get that level of support. Again, our parents are one of our major stakeholders in schools, and we are there to support them. The exact same way some parents are saying that they want the exam to take place, there are some who are saying, oh gosh, my child needs assistance. My child still needs that 3 or 4 weeks extra for them to be able to be prepared for the SE 2021.
And we're going to get to the issue of the holistic plan, which you touched on as well in your final point of your statement. But before we get to that, I don't want to preclude any other issue that you would have raised, because there are a number of matters: the issue of priority for vaccinations, the issue of consultation, which we touched on, the change for the center managers, the health requirements, and so on. But before we get to that holistically, any other point in what you would have raised yesterday, or anything additional that you want to highlight to the national public this morning?
Well, we just want all members of the public to understand that we want to work with all stakeholders to ensure that the SCA examination takes place. However, we really want the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education to ensure that all is in place, because the Ministry of Health would have given us some guidelines, and that's what we are using to ensure the school is appropriately equipped for COVID-19. So therefore, we have certain things we must have at this, and we are just begging and asking that the Ministry of Education continues to support our schools, our primary schools, and ensure that we receive these items before whatever date is finally decided upon for the SE 2021.
And this issue of the holistic plan, and I know many people roll their eyes when we start to talk about these things, because just to go with your final line, this may be a good time for the Ministry of Education to consider and implement necessary and overdue changes to the education system. Do you see that happening at all?
Well, I want to tell you we are trying. We are trying on our end, and we are asking the Ministry of Education to really look at that, because if they engage stakeholders and they are able to look at this plan, it is able to work. The thing is, we cannot continue working in a virtual world and still have an examination that is in the physical world. At the end of the day, we need to have some level of support from the ministry in trying to change this examination. We need to look at other options instead of just having the SCA examination one day. We would have heard the situation of parents speaking to that stress level, especially now, to go on that one day. Sometimes the children are prepared and they are performing very well, but on that actual day something happens, their stress level, and they cannot do the exam the way they should. So we are trying to find ways, and we need to look at that, and we all need to sit as members of the education sector to work together to try to find a way to reach our students and ensure that we have a level of equity and equality in the system.
But Ms. Hayes, with the greatest respect, I mean, I'm sure you were sitting down writing the exam yourself when this discussion was being held. We've been going on with this for decades. Is it that it's too difficult? Is it that it's too cumbersome? Is it that there's too much that needs to be changed? Is it that we don't trust continuous assessment because that leaves more room for corruption and teachers favoring certain students or certain schools twisting the system to suit themselves? Is it that because so much is required to have a properly functioning continuous assessment system that really this is the best way to go, and I see a one and done kind of thing?
Well, I want to tell you something. Change is inevitable and change is constant. And we need to understand, we need to start to embrace change. And our association, as well as the other stakeholders in education, we need to clamor with the Ministry of Education and let them know we need change. We need change, we need parental support, and we need to do it. And I understand what you're saying. We've been saying this for years, many, many years, but maybe it's now the time. Maybe COVID-19 pandemic has created an avenue for us to understand that change is inevitable in the education sector.
But are you getting the indication, whether from the ministry, whether from other stakeholders, that there's really an effort now to say, look, this virtual thing, you're told it's taking on everybody, all of the different challenges, devices who have, who don't have, who have to get packages, and all of the attendant issues. Do you think this could really be the impetus, or are we just dragging our feet against it?
No, I really believe, based on our engagement with stakeholders, that they understand as well. Like I told you, this pandemic, it may be opened an avenue for us to understand that change is needed. And dealing with these stakeholders, as the executive continue to meet with them, I'm letting you know that they are in agreement, and we need to work together to ensure that this change happens. It can happen. It takes just some time, and it takes everybody working in unity together to work out this change. It can happen.
But that's the issue, isn't it? You said working in unity together. Isn't that the real challenge? Every stakeholder seems to have a different priority, and not to talk about the ministry itself and the politicians and so on, but do you think we could actually work together towards transforming our education system?
I want to tell you, yes, we can. We can if we make up our minds to do it. We can. We can do anything once we make up our mind. And I'm letting you know, our association, the union, and the other stakeholders, we are trying our best to work together in unity to ensure this happens.
And finally, Ms. Haines, we do appreciate you taking the time to elaborate on your media release yesterday, just so we can understand it. July the 1st is the adjusted date for the SCA. And you want to get a clear statement of clearance as far as all of the health protocols from the Ministry of Health. Do you have a deadline date for that you say will be go, no go for the SCA on July the 1st? Do you have a deadline date where you want to hear from the Ministry of Health in collaboration with the Ministry of Education?
I want to tell you that at least 2 weeks before July the 1st would be an appropriate date, at least for us to understand and know what is happening. But like I said before, I know the minister, she said it yesterday, we are looking at the cases. The cases are not decreasing. If the cases don't decrease, Mr. Mohammed, we cannot have the exam, because we cannot allow our children, like I said before, we are not going to sacrifice the health and safety of our staff and of our students for an examination.
President of NAPSPA, thank you very much for taking the time to elaborate on your